I would much rather invest in the person that has potential, that maybe hasn't done the job before. They don't have the experience. What are they going to do? They're going to first principle the problem. And so they're just generally more likely to have more original ideas. Speed is actually really, really an advantage. And it helps you, like, you're not going to be right. So you might as well just learn quickly and move on.
Ready to go? Rujul, listen, I heard so many good things from Anna Khan, from Ali Raugani. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Now, I would love to start. I always think great entrepreneurs are shaped early in their career. If we think about people who saw you early in yours, how would your parents, how would your teachers have described the young Rujul?
So what I do remember is that I was always, even like, certainly high school, but even in middle school, like, I was always with my friends, like we're always doing some like business thing. You know, we were always doing something like that on the side. Like I remember at one point we like figured out how to make some really terrible, really terrible video games. I'm not even sure what we were using back then. This is in, the early 2000s. And then we would like sell them to other people in different schools. And like, I remember we'd even started something that was like, when you're driving around, sometimes you've seen those bumper stickers that say like, hey, am I driving poorly? Like, you can report me at this number. Most of them are for commercial vehicles, like trucks and vans and things like that. And we had started something like that for teen drivers. We certainly couldn't drive at that time, and so we sold some bumper stickers. So it was like that was the type of thing that we were working on. It was always something or the other.
Do you agree that you should always be embarrassed by your V1? Do you agree, or do you actually think that no, you do need to put out good product today, given product quality?
I honestly think you'll learn so much more with number one, like just put something out there, because chances are what you're building, probably not right. You just don't know what's not right about it. And you won't know until you like put it out there. And one thing I think you can always do is like, if you lack something, you can always make up for it in service. You can ask better questions. You can learn, you can iterate faster. And people really appreciate that. That's undervalued.
I totally agree. And you can build such customer advocates in the early days by actually just being so responsive and so intuitive to their feedback. Totally agree. Tell me, dude, we're going to get on to learnings from past, but just in terms of Zip, why did you choose this? What was the aha moment for you when it came to founding Zip?
So it was a problem that my co-founder Lou and I, that we had both experienced. So we had, we actually met, we both worked together at Airbnb. Lou was an engineering leader at Airbnb. I worked as a product manager. What happened was that, I remember actually one day we woke up to an email message saying, hey, Rujul and Lou, so-and-so has left the organization. You guys have been designated as the business owners of our contract with this. It was a large contract, software contract. There's a renewal coming up. And we were assigned somebody from the procurement organization because it was such a large contract. And we said, sure. We'll be the business owners, like, tell us what we need to do. And the first thing we heard what we had to do was we were told, hey, you have to go to our ERP system and create a PR. And I remember we both looked at each other and we were like, sorry, what? And the person was like, oh, it's a purchase requisition. At the time, the only PR that we knew was a pull request. And so we were like, oh, well, purchase requisition. Okay. I mean, I can understand what that means. And so, of course, I remember we go to the ERP and the first question is select your cost center. And there's thousands and thousands of options in there. And no one has ever asked us or told us what cost center we're in. Like, we have no idea what to select. And so we picked something. And then, of course, later on and asked, what's the GL code? And we're like, we don't even, what is a GL code at the time? And of course, it's an accounting classification is what it is, right? But we have no idea. Thousands of options. We select something, hit submit. I remember we distinctly went back to the procurement person we were assigned to, say, hey, we're done. Thumbs up, like just let us know when it's improved. And he said, no, you're not going anywhere. That's just the PR. Once you get the contract, it's got to get uploaded over in this system because that's where the legal team reviews contracts. And also it's a software renewal, so you have to go raise an IT ticket over here because the IT team needs to review. And also we're sharing all this customer data. So now you've got to raise a security request over here. You've got to raise a privacy request over there. And so we actually do 5 or 6 different intakes, if you will, of this information. And then, of course, as you would expect, in a month or 2 months, it's very hard to understand exactly what's happening with this request. And is it blocked? And if so, where? And I remember anytime I would have to ask the gentleman we were working with in procurement, the poor guy would have to he would be like, hey, I'm really sorry, I really don't know. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Because what he was doing is just pinging all these people manually. And so we felt like there had to be a better way.
Okay. The thing you learn about the shows is we have schedules and then I just go for it. So one of my biggest things that I look for when investing today is massive markets, obvious, but with very low competition. That's a strange one that other people don't necessarily have. When you look at this market as a newbie, you're like, gosh, you just type in, procurement or spend management and it's ad with big names. When you looked at it, were you not like, oh Christ, there's a lot of players. This is not attractive because it's so competitive?
Oh, I mean, in a sense, absolutely. But there's a pro and a con. The pro is that, well, if there's a lot of parties in the space in general, that means it's a big space and there must be some real pain here. So for us, it was like, there's enough here. There's clearly, we're not taking on market risk in a sense. But what's the unique insight we have based on the problem that we experienced when we were working together? And what we realized and what that unique insight was, hey, wait a minute. In the last 10 years, 15 years, 2 changes have occurred in the world. One, buying has become much more distributed. I mean, it's hard for us to believe, but 20 years ago, there was a time when the IT department, for example, would be like, hey, folks, this is all the software we're buying this year. It's going to come to us in CDs. And we decided we're going to buy it. And then people would be like, cool. And no one else would be buying anything. Right? Obviously, that's not the world that we live in today. It's gotten so much more distributed. And so when things get distributed, user experience matters a lot more because you're not, if it's a small group, you can just train them. But if it's your, thousands of employees, you can't train all your employees on how to buy something.
How do you think about the centralization of budgets? With budgets generally contracting or being frozen, a lot of people say CFOs are much more active in terms of the buying process. Are you actually, that's not at all what we're seeing and that's bullshit? How do you think about the centralization of budgets given what we just said there?
Yeah. It's what I would say is it's decentralization of the initiation of the spend and centralization in many aspects of the review of the spend. And so you're totally right. I mean, one of the things we see across the hundreds of customers we have today is, our customers control their delegation of authority in zip, right? So, hey, if it's above, the simple example is, hey, if it's above, $100,000, then I want my CFO to review versus another company might say it's $1 million. Another company might say it's 10,000. And I think it was interesting to see with the macro climate of the last 18, months or whatever it's been, delegation of authority certainly came down across the board in many, many organizations because the CFO wants to see more.
By how much in general? Is it like a 25% reduction where it used to be, hey, for 100K contracts, it's now 75? Or is it like a 75% reduction, generally speaking?
So I would actually say there's extremes. I think it's like no reduction to extremely substantial reduction. And I'll give you one example that one of our customer champions had shared with me there. This is a champion that works at maybe a 3,000, 2,500 person company. He said for a handful of months, the CFO had reduced their budget all the way down to $5,000, which is really low, right? I mean, that's really, really low because the CFO was just concerned we're spending too much money, wanted to just see everything. They then later increased it because it was just, too much throughput once they'd gotten some view of it.
Because the CFO died.
yeah, they're getting pummeled, right, with the level of requests. But I think actually part of the value too is, or I think it's important to be able to be fluid with these decisions, right? A lot of the changes in older school systems, I mean, it's hard to make changes like that on the fly.
Totally. Is it a product marketing challenge? So again, when I'm investing, I'm like, okay, so competitive market, but actually Rujul and Lou have a unique insight. Then it comes to, well, how the fuck do we stand out in such a crowded market? How do you think about a product marketing challenge when the key buzzwords are kind of the same and you need to stand out?
It's an education problem. It's challenging and you have to select people in and out. Like most people won't get it. And that's okay because if they all got it, somebody would have, started a company already. And so you have to filter out, I think this person's just they're not there yet. They're a late adopter, whatever. It's okay. One day they'll buy, but not today.
It's a big problem to go after. And you're like, fuck, this schedule was useless, Harry. It's a big problem to go after. I'm just so interested. It's a big problem to go after, like, first off from day one. How do you think about the product decision of whether to go in with a kind of feature that solves one specific pain point or a much broader platform play, which really tries to address a lot of the problems from day one? How do you think about that?
You'll eventually get to the latter. But I think for first off, like, I mean, given how much capacity you have, which is basically nothing when you're starting out, you have to find, and it's actually healthy that you don't have that many resources, because it's the forcing function to say, what is that one thing, the one pain point that somebody will be like, you're right, I need that thing, and like, it doesn't exist otherwise in the world for me. That, because what actually happens is when you have a platform, other people have platforms too, and they all do everything. But then the question becomes, how do you differentiate your platform from somebody else's platform? And you'll actually always come back to that one thing that you started with, which is, hey, no, this is the thing that makes us special in the world. No one else does this at anywhere near the level that we do. That's why our platform is better. We do a lot of things that they do too, but this thing is different. And it's your wedge. It'll always be your wedge.
With the first wedge that you had, that first pain point that you identified, did it immediately sell? Like, was there immediate market pull and you were like, okay, great, we have early product market fit with first pain point?
I would say it was relatively quick, but it took us maybe 6-7 months to sort of convince ourselves and be able to better explain what we're doing to our prospects. So to your point about product marketing, it's, you have to start with the positioning and the messaging, and that probably took us 6 months. Once we started to figure out how to like explain what we're doing and clearly differentiate it, it's certainly accelerated.
How did you learn to explain it? For founders listening today who don't feel like it's resonating, who don't feel like it hits, what lessons do you have from that 6-month period of exploration to your ultimate, it started to hit, that you'd share with them?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So what we actually did, so we were actually quite rote in our approach here. Every week, actually, initially it was every day because we had so many calls, and then we were like, we don't need to review this every day. We did it every Sunday. We would write out our quote unquote investor pitch, which is like, a couple sentences of like what Zip does, but the investor view of it, talking about like the market, that kind of thing. And then the customer pitch. And we would keep, at one point we were looking at both of those in one Google Doc every single day. And we'd be like, what did we learn today? Like, would we change how we frame it? And then we would test it for all the calls that we would do the following day. Then it got to a point where we're like, no, we don't need to change it that much. Let's review this every week. And so we basically had this process where we were constantly reviewing. Then as we started to talk to more people, we sort of morphed this and literally built an Excel, like a Google sheet, and morphed it into ICP. Like we had different potential ICPs as the row, as each row, because we didn't know, like, are we going to sell to IT, legal, procurement, which ended up being the case, finance, right? Like all these people have to approve things that people are buying, but who's going to really like be the actual ICP buyer? It might sound intuitive that, yeah, of course you would be selling your software to procurement and finance people, which is the case, but it didn't feel that way. In fact, our first handful of customers were IT, which was actually, interesting signal.
It's totally interesting signal. Does that tell you something in terms of sometimes you need to say no to customers? It's like sometimes big early customers can distract your product roadmap, can take you away from what you're actually meant to be doing. I find sometimes early signals can be misleading. Like you said there, the fact that IT people bought you does not mean that they're the buyers ultimately. Procurement is your home. Do you know what I mean?
100%. And you absolutely should. If you need to, you should not close a certain type of customer. You should fire a customer. It happened to us maybe when we were about a year old. We signed, or not even a year old, as a company, we signed a customer that had hundreds of thousands of employees. And it was, to be fair, it was a sort of a pilot type engagement. And we, I realized the company was only 15 people or so, 12 to 15 people. Very quickly at implementation, I realized, wait a minute, because I would go to every implementation call at the time. We're not going to be able to make this company successful without sacrificing an extremely, extremely large percentage of our roadmap. And it's just not the right thing for us to do as a company. And so I had a really great call with our champion there, and just, no, I respect the fact that you're telling me that you guys can't make us successful right now, and call us when you're ready. And then we called them later, a year after that. But that was a tough decision at the moment.
It's bold, and a lot of people take it because the validity that it brings to subsequent customers and to investors is real. Signing a massive contract really brings confidence and momentum to especially investor bases. I do want to just hone in on like the right problem. I find a lot of founders aren't actually solving the right problem. You mentioned there actually it was pretty early that approvals was the right entry wedge. What advice do you have for founders on how to know whether they're solving the right problem and that discovery process?
I think it comes down to repeatability, right? Like really everything about building a company is about, in some ways, it's about repeatability. It's like, okay, can you do this? Then can you do more of it? And then can you have other people do more of it? And then can you have even more people do more of it? And maybe quality degrades, but it still works because there's enough fit pull from the market. And so really the question would be, are you able to repeatably use that same type of pitch and narrative to the same type of person and yield the same type of result? And if the answer is no, then that means you kind of haven't figured it out in some way.
I totally agree with you. What do you think the biggest mistakes are that founders make then? Is it the fact that they don't nail the repeatability of that pitch, so to speak? Or is it the fact that they just go after the wrong problems?
I think that a couple of common mistakes are, one, getting free customers or design partners, which is, I think, a euphemism for a free customer.
Wait, boy, this is like a boom. You and I both know, dude. Every founder's like, I've got 12 design partners. And I'm always like, what does that mean? I've got a blow up girlfriend? Like, I don't understand this. Why do you not agree with design partners?
Well, so Lou and I were very strict in our thinking. We decided, hey, we don't want to look, at the end of the day, if we pick an idea, we're going to work on it. More than anybody else, we don't want to waste our own time. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to make sure that the first 10 customers we close, we're going to close them cold off of LinkedIn. They're not going to be people we know. They're not going to be warm introductions. They're not going to be referrals, nothing. They're going to be cold because if they buy it, they owe us nothing in the world. Then they actually have this problem and they're willing to pay. And we're going to charge real money for it. Now, of course, when you're starting out, you have 0 customers. Of course, you don't charge that much money and it goes up over time, but they're going to pay. And something material for us at the time. And I think a lot of the times, this is my second company, but I can just see how different my mindset has been this time around than the first go around. But early on, you're trying to keep your investors happy. You want to make it feel like it's working. And the second time, or at least for me, it was like, look, we're just here. We want to build a generational company. We'd rather just know this is a bad idea quickly so we can go work on something else.
How do you do it differently when you are just trying to make your investors happy versus doing it for you and doing it to build a big company?
Oh, it's easy. You care about things like optics. You care about, are the metrics all going up consistently? And, all these little things. And when you actually are just you know what, I just want to build a really big company. I just want the thing to work. You just don't care. Right? Why would you care? What happens is you're just here to make the thing work and you want to protect your own time. And actually, when you do that, everything actually does start to look better. But it's the mindset.
So I cut you off. You said design partners, number one, people make mistakes with that. Any other glaring mistakes? Mistakes in terms of solving the right problem and actually how they articulate the repeatability of that. You said repeatability being the most important thing.
Oh yeah, I think design partner, and I think being very clear. It's so easy to fall into slightly customizing the product for each different type of customer you have, and you have so few at the time you care about a lot of them, right? You don't want to have somebody churn, and then you start to you've built something that's a slightly different thing to 5 different people. This I think goes back to the theme of repeatability. I've seen so many founders do that too, and you can talk yourself into it, but then that makes it really harder, right? Because how do you prioritize feature requests? How do you message your product on your website? Are you speaking to this persona or that persona or this problem or that problem? It's getting more customers is you're you need a weapon that you're going into the world with, and you want the sharpest possible point. You don't want something that's blunt.
I totally agree with you. I love that analogy. You mentioned repeatability time and time again there. And for investors, they say it's when you have repeatable and scalable processes. That is when you have product market fit. And I just think product market fit is the most bullshit thing ever, because you scale to a new channel, you scale to a new audience, you scale to a new pricing level, and you don't have it again. And so I'd love to just hear your thoughts. How do you think about product market fit, having had it with Zip, having seen it firsthand?
No, completely agree. Product market fit is certainly not binary. It's like a complicated matrix, and like the first cell in that matrix is like the first set of product market fit you have. But as you distribute, I mean, like you said, we're talking about platforms. As you add more capabilities, more products, right? You have to go through product market fit for every subsequent product that you launch as a company, and then you have to do the same thing for every persona you speak with, every channel that you have, every industry. I mean, it can get gloriously complicated. Every vertical, right? You might, if you sell to retail versus you sell to financial services. I mean, just because you have market fit in tech doesn't mean you have market fit in financial services and so forth.
Do you build out a verticalized sales playbook then? Because you can have very distinct customer profiles that you can go after with that sharp spear. And it's much more effective to do that than have a horizontal product marketing approach and just kind of going at everyone with the same message. And for founders listening, is that the best way to do it?
So we don't do that at Zip. And I think it may be like we don't verticalize our sales organization today. And it might, and it's some of this is, I think, product specific, but it is extremely, extremely expensive to verticalize your sales team. And at least from other founders that are much ahead of us that I've spoken to, like it's when people do it, it is at a much, much, much different level of scale. And ideally what you want actually is, hey,
can I just ask you, sorry, why is it, say you have incredible pull from, I'm just using this as an example, large restaurant chains. They have a huge amount of buyers across different segments and procurement's a nightmare, just saying. Why not have someone to go after hospitality? It can be 100 grand a year, quite young person, your job, boof, 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 hospitality. Does it need to be expensive? I don't know.
No, it's a great point. I mean, I think you can like, I actually think that's the right approach. I think you actually bootstrap it by having like a smart, like 0 to 1 type, maybe an ex-founder, right? Like that type of person, like figure out, because what you need to figure out is what's the messaging? Like, are there any like specific systems they use that like we've never heard of? Like just get all that stuff working, build up the right assets and positioning just so, your team can be successful. But then ideally you can just fold that into the rest of the organization. And maybe you have a pocket of people that are focused on it if it's very specific. But it depends on whether the horizontal messaging fundamentally lands or not. And it depends on the product. If it's not that horizontal, then you may need to verticalize sooner.
Did you find it hard building out the sales team? You're a very product-led organization. You're a very product-led founder as well. Was it hard building out the sales team in the way that you had to and have done?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It continues to be, right. I mean, there are always changes in how you sell. But yeah, I mean, look, we both for Lou and me. I mean, we came from consumer. We came from Airbnb. We had worked on consumer companies in the past. So this was our first rude awakening to, hey, this is how it works with sales teams. So this was new for us.
What was the rude awakenings?
So many different things, but to actually be able to understanding it was like understanding every component of a sales cycle, right? I remember we have, so many awesome sales engineers at Zip today. And initially I was completely skeptical. I was like, I don't understand. Why would anybody ever need a sales engineer? We can just have the account executive do the demo and, they should be able to answer the questions. And then we realized like we were running into limitations around like technical questions and like, you actually do need somebody that has a more technical person. So it's a lot of first principles learning around how the actual process works. And it's also, I think the other big thing is it's hard to assess, right? Like product, like you can look at metrics, not to say you can't in sales, but every metric you look at, the more you zoom into it, you realize like, actually, maybe you should be looking at the anecdote. Like, let's go listen to the gong call of where this actually happened or is happening. And it's like a human problem. It's not like a software problem. And that's just harder.
I love it. The CPO of Spotify says the details are not the details, they are the product. And it makes me think of that when you say about kind of drilling down and going into the weeds of a gong call. That's where the importance is. Like the details are important.
Yeah. And it's also hard. Like, one of the things I've learned is like confidence. For a salesperson talking to a prospect, one of the most important things is confidence. How do you measure that? But two, how do you fix that? It's very hard. That's what makes it so complex, so soft.
How do you fix that? Is it a case of geeing everyone up and saying, hey, Rujul, you're a rock star? How do you give them the confidence to crush it on gong calls?
No, it's better enablement, more at bats, right? It's like when you're in this type of situation, you know what to say, and you can say it with confidence. Like you can say that, yes, this thing, yes, our product does that and does it really well. Here are the two reasons why. Here's what makes us different, right? It's just a lot of enablement, and at bats, which is actually kind of like repeatability.
Did you bring in a sales leader first and they built out the team, or did you bring in reps first and then layered on top a sales leader?
The latter. We hired one salesperson who was an AE in his past, or held a number of different roles. Who basically I fired myself from a lot of the sales job, right? Because I was just doing sales at that point, and then we brought him in, and then I would he would just shadow everything. Then I would let him do the first call deck, but I would do the demo, and then he started doing the demo. So we sort of moved that way.
What stage did you hand off sales? What was that like? And for founders listening, I think that founder-led sales transition to someone else is so hard. What stage did you hand it off? And do you have any tips or advice on how to do that well?
Yeah, really challenging. I think for me, it was like, hey, I feel like I've gotten to the point where now I'm doing first calls and I'm not really learning anything. I honestly felt like I'm not really learning anything new. I'm just having the first call to go get the deal. And when it started to feel like that, that's when I was like, and Lou and I were both like, okay, like now it's time, because we're not learning anything new. Let's try to get a little bit more skill, right? With one more person. And then in terms of, of course, like we certainly had, it's a trust building exercise, right? Because you need to get the person ramped. Of course, you have no documentation. You don't have anything. I mean, it's just a 4 or 5 person company at the time at most. And so you just spend a lot of time, you shadow everything and get more and more comfortable. So it's tricky. And thankfully it worked out really well at Zip, but I don't think it always does. I have other founder friends who hire 2. So there's some competition and then go from there. We didn't do that.
It's really hard. And then sometimes you have 2 not work, and then you're really in trouble, because it's like, is it them? Is it me? Could just be them. It could be you. It's a night, and then you lose time. Can I ask you on the losing time element? I've had so many founders on the show before say speed is the most important thing in a company's success. It's the biggest determinant of whether they get product. Is that true, do you think, or not?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, right? Like you were to bet on, one of 2 horses. One horse is really thoughtful, is really sort of planning, and they've got a whole strategy. They're they're going to execute it, but they're slower. And the other horse actually doesn't have the best strategy, but it learns quickly and it just keeps changing path. Which one's going to get to the destination faster? Unless the first one is perfectly right, which almost certainly it's not, that first horse is not going to be, I would bet on the second horse. And I think that's the mindset, we have internal. I would much rather bet on a Zip that, we sometimes joke internally, but it's a way for us to push ourselves to get better. We sort of talk about, how do we compete with the other Zip? In an alternate reality, there's a clone of the clone of Zip in the alternate reality. How would we beat that clone? And usually the answer is we'd do something, we would just iterate faster. Speed is actually really, really an advantage. And it helps you, you're not going to be right. So you might as well just learn quickly and move on. The other thing is, as companies grow, they just get slower. And so we really, really wanted to establish as high of a watermark as possible, because when we were a 5-person company, I mean, we're certainly way slower than we were when we were a 5-person company, right? And just like we're much slower than we were when we were a 100-person company.
Dude, you'd be the most mythical CEO if you could actually retain speed with scale. So don't worry about that. I've never met anyone. 700 of the biggest CEOs, never has anyone done that. My question to you, though, is as much as one possibly can, what would be your biggest advice on how to retain some form of speed with scale?
One, it has to come from you. You have to lead by example as a founder. The founders have to lead by example. It bleeds into the rest of the company, and you have to reward that. You have to reward that and call it out and shout it out inside the company. If somebody does something quickly and they achieve some result, even if it doesn't work out, you should reward them for it, and you should make sure other people see that happened and that they were rewarded for it. That sort of sets the DNA and the culture. And again, we're just one data point. I don't know if that's quite worked here either. I'm a biased party to ask, obviously, but that's at least what we try to do.
I get you. I think kind of repeatability can also solve for some form of speed because it makes things more known. My question to you that I really struggle with is like, we actually have a pretty repeatable process in media companies in terms of how we do shows. One, obviously, every guest is their own individual snowflake, but shows are relatively the same in terms of structure and how they're composed. We can never lose creativity though. Like, it's so important that our social team is so creative with each show. How do you retain creativity where people bring fresh new ideas and they're not just like Rujul set the repeatable playbook?
I think it's a couple of things. I think one, and this is much easier said than done, frankly, but it's empowering people to like speak up and rewarding more off the wall ideas and like alternative approaches, right? And rewarding first principles thinking. And a lot of that relies on like, what at least I've found is that I would much rather invest in the person that has potential, that maybe hasn't done the job before, but like has a high ceiling, because that person is more likely to think through, they don't have the experience. So what are they going to do? They're going to first principle the problem. And so they're just generally more likely to have more original ideas. And so I think a lot of this is like, you can sort of culturally set this up if you have more managers and leadership in the organization that's actually cut from the DNA of the company and high potential, but maybe isn't like taking a playbook from somewhere else and cutting and pasting it into your company. There's a time and place for that maybe too, so you have to balance it. But I think like if you only do that, you don't get as much creativity out of the organization. The other thing we try to do is have a lot of brainstorms.
What does that look like? Like a weekly brain? How does that look in reality?
Oh, if we've got a problem, like some hairy, like complicated problem, what we'll do is try to get not a very large group, right? Because then it's not productive, but a good group of like pretty diverse cross-functional people that are working on or touching this problem in for an hour. And like, at least what I found work out is like, all right, everybody takes 15 minutes and write all your ideas out one-on-one. And we just go around and then try to whittle that down. And then we end the meeting with like, 5 ideas. Maybe 2 of them we would have thought of anyways, but there's 3 like pretty interesting ones that maybe we wouldn't have thought of. And that's like one way to solve problems.
How important is focus? Everyone's like focus, but then you also want to encourage creativity. People come up with great ideas. How do you think about where to really focus your attention and resources versus when to focus?
I think it really depends on the problem and the function. Like, for example, I think marketing is such a diverse function, right? Because it encapsulates product marketing and growth and like content, like all these different things. Like, I actually think like having marketing be quite unfocused is actually okay in its execution. Messaging needs to be focused, to be fair, right? Messaging to the world, because otherwise it sounds like you're saying, 1,000 different things. But execution actually can be unfocused. And I think it's actually okay in some cases like that. And I don't know, maybe that's a controversial statement, but I don't think you have to be that focused in every function.
Can I ask you, when you think about speed being the most important thing, what was a decision you made with speed that with hindsight should have taken more time and should have had more consideration or thought put into it? I asked someone the other day and they said marriage. I said, you are fucked.
That's so funny. Actually, I'll give you a great example. So Zip is my second company. So my first company was a company called Flightcar. TLDR, we would give you free airport parking by renting out your car to somebody else, fully insured. And I dropped out of college to the company. And I remember I called my friend at the time, say, hey, we're both bored. Like, are you down? Like, why don't we do a company? And he was like, sure. And I remember I grew up in New Jersey. And so, of course, New Jersey, sort of at the time, at least, you would go to Panera Bread. Like, that's where you would go hang out. And so, we were like, all right, let's go meet up at the Panera Bread tomorrow for an hour. And let's just, whatever the best idea is that we can come up with in an hour, let's just do it. And I remember that hour, this was in 2012, I think, he was telling me, he's like, hey, there's this thing called Airbnb, and people are sharing their houses with each other. We're like, really? Like, I've never heard of that. And then we sort of, one thing led to another. We're like, well, would they do it with their cars? And if they're going to do it with their cars, maybe they'd do it at the airport because they're not, by definition, traveling. They're not using their car. And so that was the idea that we came up with in that 1 hour. And then we did it for 5 years, literally, right? I would never do that again. Like we took exactly the opposite approach when we started Zip. But like, that's like, once you pick your idea and you're like working on, I mean, you're like, of course you can change, right? We didn't, but like, then you're just so deep in. So that was one, like if you're going to do a company, don't time box yourself to 1 hour.
Should you have quit earlier?
It's like one of those things where like, I would do everything differently, but have no regrets. And I think like, I mean, what I learned from that company was, it was a very operational business. I mean, at our peak, we had 17 different airport locations, hundreds of hourly workers washing cars and picking up people and dropping them off at the airport, right? I learned so much in terms of like what it takes to be an operational business. And boy, is it easy to run a B2B SaaS company? Like we have our problems, but like, it's not like we're constantly going to be running out of money. Like you don't have to worry about any of these things. Like you don't have like 24/7, 365, like support needed with like emergency situations. Like it's just not that.
So I have this with founders a lot who will pitch and you're like, I understand the premise of FlightCon. It's just a really hard business to work with all the different aspects that need to come into play together for it to work. For that margin to drop to the bottom line, I'm not saying it won't work. There's just easier things to go after to build a massive business. And I always feel quite guilty saying that.
Yeah, exactly. Like there are easier paths to success. And that was totally, I mean, that's the analogy that I used in that business. It's like, the margin you make, it's like squeezing all the juice out of a lemon. The last drop that falls out is your margin. So if you screw up halfway through squeezing the lemon, you don't need to squeeze the rest of the lemon to understand how the movie ends. And that was the business. That was the business.
Were there any other big lessons from that business?
I mean, so many things, man. But one was do a B2B SaaS company next, by far. Two, I think this is something that I think I learned later at Airbnb, but like, the bar of like what a really good product designer is like, or what a really good engineer is like. Like, when you go into it cold, you've never worked anywhere, like you kind of don't really know. You're just feeling your way around things. And so I think understanding the hiring and the talent bar was something that working at Airbnb later on, I think really personally helped me with. Which is something that I didn't have back then.
I agree with you, which is why I have this kind of investment thesis, which my team kill me for, especially for saying it out loud. They're terrified that first-time founders won't come to us. But I don't like first-time founders like I like serial entrepreneurs, because you've just seen it. You know how to do hiring processes. You know what great looks like. You've seen the mistakes, you've made them. And we're leveraging the mistakes you've made before. Do you agree with that thesis of like, yep, serial entrepreneurs, you've just made the mistakes? Or are you like, no, there's beauty in naivety, in youth, in upside thinking?
For me as a second-time founder, I was very, very determined. Lou and I both were to work on a company, work on an idea that had high execution risk, low fundamental market risk, and sort of product risk. I think as a first-time founder, you're actually much more okay, maybe because you don't know any better, like me, to take on a lot more market risk. And so you can actually have really large outcomes. I mean, a lot of the social media companies, I guess, are good examples, but Snap is not a company that like it carried a lot of market risk, right? Like the whole thing. And I'm not sure someone would do that as a second-time founder, but it's obviously a wildly successful company. And so like you can have outcomes like that, but that like you almost can't have as a second-time founder. Maybe because you're just, I don't know, too jaded about the world or too bored.
I'm going to go there, even though I thought that I wouldn't. You said number one lesson was do B2B. I had Trey on from Founders Fund, and he said serial entrepreneurs in SaaS are like George Clooney selling tequila, in the way that seriously, you have a massive opportunity with your skills and talents, and you decide to do B2B enterprise SaaS. Like, that is not serving the world. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say it's a little bit different than selling tequila. And I would, I actually would say that, like, if you take what we work on at Zip in procurement, I mean, there's like 11 times as much money that moves hands between businesses than moves hands between a consumer and a business in the global economy. So it's actually so much money that moves hands. And if you can make that just a tad bit more efficient across the board, you actually create so much value in the economy that's being lost. And that ultimately, I mean, this of course takes many steps, but that does carry over to consumers. But I hear you. I mean, it's it's like you lose the anecdote of like the person that got something that made them happy. Like, I mean, I guess you have that, but inside of an organization.
Yeah, no, and listen, I get you actually. I think you can actually very clearly articulate that by helping people spend more, you're empowering job creation, you're empowering productivity in the economy in a massive way. I actually think, to be fair, this is a case where you could argue it pretty sufficiently well. My second question to you is, I spoke to Ali Ralgani, and he said to me to double click on what you just said there, which is the lessons learned from Airbnb. What were some of the lessons learned from Airbnb on, you mentioned what great looks like, so maybe that and any others?
Oh, it was just so helpful for me to see Brian Chesky, CEO of Airbnb, just how the level of attention to detail when it comes to the Airbnb product. I mean, you remember design reviews where, to his credit, he would be able to detect that, some of the spacing is off, or right, like just on our mobile app, or like just like really, really focus on detail. And what that does is, of course, do those extra, 10 pixels of white space in and of themselves matter? No, but they matter a ton in terms of what that says to the company and what, and where the bar is for quality of the product. Just like speed, right? Product quality, design, like all of that also, I think ultimately is a cultural thing, and it comes from the founders.
But can you have that? Can you have that micromanagement, that intense focus on the pixel spacing and the speed of execution that is required?
I think so, but it's because you have to focus on different things. Like you have to, you can't micromanage everything. You have to be selective, I guess is the right framing, about what you micromanage, because you have to micromanage the few like critical things that are like very, like their core values to the company. That doesn't mean you can't be quick in other areas.
What are you selective in the areas that you micromanage, and what areas are you deliberately not selective in what you micromanage?
I think I spend a lot of time in the actual, we were talking about sales, just like how human the problem is, and how at some point you have to look into the anecdote. Spend a lot of time on that. Everything from, gong call listening to like, just like spending a lot of time getting into the details of like what exactly was said, like what exactly is happening, like why is this person, performing better than that person? Like, can we like take something that they're doing, really double clicking on that, and not trying to manage the go-to-market organization by metrics alone, because it's so hard to like actually affect change that way. That's probably the number one.
And which one are you like, fuck it, I'm happy to not micromanage that. I can clearly delegate that, and it's not a problem.
My job, I think, in many ways, is to focus on what's not working, right? So it's like, if there's an area of the business that seems to be doing just fine, that doesn't mean it won't break, because it probably will. But right now, it's not the thing that's on fire, or it doesn't look like there's some smoke there. You kind of let it go. But it's got to be not high stakes.
What's not working right now?
Oh, there are always things not working. One of the things we're working through is how best to scale some portions of our sales organization, like our business development organization. Right? It's a tough job to cold call people, to email them, to send a message on LinkedIn, get interest. How do you sort of scale that team and maintain productivity and allow that team to have like a great career path into the AE role at SIP, which is something we're really proud of.
How much of net new client acquisition is from that team today?
We're largely an outbound business. So
largely an outbound business.
Yep.
Wow. That's so interesting though, for me as like someone in this industry. I think the brand is so strong. The investor sentiment is so strong. I think it would largely be an inbound strength of brand business.
Thank you for saying that. No, I think a lot of, enterprise, sales and enterprise go-to-market is, given how top down it is actually quite outbound. And it will shift over time for us too. And I can already, it's inbound is, at a larger percentage than it's ever been in the history of the company. But the majority is still outbound, especially after we go after different industries, into the enterprise, so forth, right? Like, it's also about like, hey, we talk to somebody in an organization, we understand there's a problem, but we have to get to the right person, like literally the right person. And that's very hard to do when you're targeting an account in an organization in an inbound way.
It's also super hard because you don't have like clean data, I find, on titles within companies. What is one thing in one company is another thing in another company. And actually buyers are very differently placed according to different companies. So it's Do you see what I mean? It's not like, great, them.
No, completely agree. And especially when you sort of add to that different geos, different countries, like it just gets even more complicated. It's very hard to tell.
Well, we may be getting too into the weeds, but I am just interested, like scaling the outbound side. I am just like, I think AI will actually destroy outbound in many cases because it will just create infinite supply of messages or infinite supply of whatever channel that is. And so I think you actually see the complete removal of it. I don't know how you think about that.
I don't see it quite as a complete removal. Although, look, maybe in 20 years, like who the hell knows, right? But I do think like there's an opportunity to like increase the leverage of the team, and we're trying out a bunch of stuff using ChatGPT to there's just so much manual work that goes on that you can actually start to automate even today. So we'll see. I'll probably have a better read in 6 months or a year.
In terms of like giving the team that trajectory you mentioned from like BD and outbound to AEs and, other parts of the sales function, it's really hard to motivate teams when they're not together physically. I know that you've been a proponent of back to office. Can you talk to me? How do you get excited about people going back to office and returning to physically co-locating?
Yeah, it's such a tough thing, especially for companies like ours that were born right in the heart of the pandemic. And it's challenging because it varies by function. Now, one of the things we do is for engineering, product, and design, we mandate 2 days a week, specific days, Mondays and Thursdays, in the office. And that actually was born from, what we found was that it was actually, a lot of engineering is like a maker's job, right? And design, you're writing code, and you have to really focus. And it's just, I think what we found from a lot of our early folks is that it was kind of just like lonely to like just do that. Like they were craving some more like social engagement, some more engagement in some way, shape, or form. And then they were drowning in meetings, of course. And so what we decided to do is we prioritize in-office days and then try to push all the meetings to happen in-office days so that there was like other times you get like a really healthy balance. One of the things, actually, this is, I think an interesting thing that we did is, so early on, when we started the company, Lou and I both bought these Facebook portals, which I think is now, I don't think Facebook sells those anymore. Actually, I still have mine. It's right there. And we would keep a Zoom meeting going the entire day because we're in different locations during the pandemic. So for 12, 14 hours, 16 hours a day, we just had just the Zoom meeting. Then as we grew the team, we had more team members join. Every morning, you would just, if you worked at Zip and, you would just join the same Zoom meeting and keep it on video, then on mute. And so it was kind of cool. So when up to like 20 or so people, we just had a Zoom meeting with everybody just hanging out. But what really helped was initially it was just me doing sales. And so whenever I was doing any sales call, I would leave myself unmuted. So even if you were an engineer at Zip really early, you would be listening to every single sales call. There's only one happening at one time because we just wanted me. And so you'd listen to everything. And so it was actually really like, we learned I think we really accelerated internal enablement and learning at that time. But anyways, I think that's part of the reason why people were sort of, craving some level of social engagement.
Can I ask, what have been your biggest hiring mistakes? We talked about kind of motivating teams to get back into the office. I think you learn so much from your mistakes. What have been your biggest hiring mistakes? And how did that change your thinking on acquiring and retaining great talent?
Yeah, I think we touched on this a little bit before, but I think the number one thing is like over-indexing on someone that's done it before at like a similar level of scale, right? Like I think even for a lot of investors, I think it's like people love the like press release hire or the like, hey, this person did it, they did this and they took it from 100 to 250 of ARR, whatever it is, and so like, we should just get them and plug them in here and like it would be perfect fit and like similar, sales cycle or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that can't work. It totally can, but you incur a lot of risk doing that because it also, every business is very different. Every situation is extremely different. Like the same playbook certainly won't work. It's just like, will the person be able to figure out how to change the playbook enough? Right. Versus, maybe you bet on the person that like has proven themselves out in whatever thing they're doing and have a lot of potential to just get one level above, but you have an honest conversation about, look, hey, you're going to step into these, bigger shoes. We're taking a bit of a risk here. So are you. And so you tell me if you think it's not working and I'll tell you if I think it's not working. And let's just like both keep the, finger on the pulse and like monitor. And I, that's not the right call all the time, but I think it's actually the right call much more often than people realize. And you never get recognized for it, right? Because like most of the time, an investor or somebody external will be like, oh, like, sorry, who is that? Like, what experience do they have?
How quickly do you know a bad hire?
We've been slow in the past, or you always feel like you could have been faster. It depends on the situation, it depends on the function. Look, I think the way I see it, like if I feel like that's the case, I'm the last one to know, right? Because their team probably has figured that out already for months. Their peers have figured it out for months. Like, so it's like, how do you find out faster? One of the things that we do is like, there are obviously trusted OG people that like I trust, that I know are great, and trying to maintain a close dialogue with people like that so that they can temperature check, right? It doesn't mean that they're always right. Certainly not the case. There's always like gray areas and a lot of nuance. But if you start to hear, feedback that somebody's not performing from like a lot of people that you know are high performers, that's a massive red flag. And so can you use those types of people who are sort of spread out throughout the organization to like give you just better signal earlier?
I always remember Max Levchin telling me, when there's doubt, there's no doubt. And I'm not sure if it's right, but it just always stuck with me. When you doubt someone's ability, there's no doubt that they're probably not the right person for the job. I don't know if that's true.
I think that's probably true 8 out of 10 times. And the challenge is that it's probably not true 2 out of 10 times, but is it worth continuing to see if it's, an 80%?
Do you agree when someone's on a performance review, just don't bother? It's always a slippery slope.
I actually don't agree with that. And I'll tell you why. If that is the case, that means you probably are doing the performance review too late, or the performance plan. I assume that's what you meant. Too late, and you're not giving the person an opportunity to like you haven't like detected it early enough, I guess, and given them an opportunity to course correct earlier.
Did you worry about raising too much money too quickly? So
if this were my first company, I certainly should have worried. We didn't worry quite as much because we knew we were going to maintain discipline. One of the things, another mistake I think a lot of founders make is they like just hire too much too early before they like know without a doubt that they have like clear product market fit. And I think, and just to be clear, like initial product market fit, right, from the earlier parts of our conversation, I think that's so important though, like to really keep a small team, because at that point in time, because say the thing isn't working, right? Like if if you're working with 5-6 people, you're hanging out all day, you're all working together, you can be like, hey guys, like actually like this is a bad idea. Like we should do this, or we should change it, right? You can do that because you have the trust. But when you have 20 people, you cannot possibly have that type of relationship with the other 19 of you. And you just sold them. You were like, oh, look, this is an awesome company. Like, it's great. And like, blah, blah, blah. And, if you're at that point in time, you can't be like, actually, I was just wrong, even though that was 2 weeks ago. Right. Because of course you have that in your head. Like, yeah, maybe this isn't the right one. We'll figure it out, but maybe it's not the right one early on. And so, we certainly raised a lot of money then. And then later, obviously, past that point, but we were very disciplined. Like no matter what money we had in the bank, we were not going to hire more. There was a point where we were a small company and cash flow positive because we had just held back hiring so much. And then we really unlocked the gates when we felt like we had confidence in 2021.
Price-wise, investors will pay up for assets that are great with great founders like you and Lou. Were you worried about the price bluntly just being very, very high in such a short space of time? It means you have to live into that valuation. It's hard, and we see a lot of people struggle with that today. How did you think about that at the time?
I think for us, it was like, we were just so confident that there's like so much market need and like the growth rate that we had and have. It was more just an opportunity to like do something that we maybe would have done a little bit later and just do it now. And that's how I thought about it. We had that confidence and we have the confidence now.
Rujul, you're constantly speaking to people, investors, employees, customers. What question do you not get asked that you should get asked more?
That's a tough question.
Do you see yourself running Zip in 20 years' time?
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to start a company that was going to be a generational company. Like a company that at the time, this was 2020 when we started the company, in 2040, it would not only be around, but people would know what it is.
It's so funny. One of my biggest turn-offs when investing is when you hear like a founder say, hey, when I do my next company, or I'm doing that as well. I-
This is it.
Yeah, exactly. And I've interviewed, so many of the best, and this is their life's work. Like, this is the only thing they focus on. And that is such a big sign for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, not once have I ever thought of something after. Like, there is no after. Like, there's not one.
Listen, I want to dive into a quick fire round. So I say a short statement, you give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Okay.
Okay, so what have you changed your mind on most in the last 12 months?
Oh gosh, I think it's probably my how I manage my day to day. So there was a point early on when we had like a huge spreadsheet, and every single person in the company would just literally write out their to-dos for the day in each tab in the spreadsheet. Obviously, that broke up for like 10, 15 people. My current thing is I have a note card, and I actually write out what I'm going to do for the day on the note card. It goes in my pocket, and I cross it out, and then I throw it out, and I have a fresh one tomorrow. We'll see how long that lasts and if I need to change it. But yeah, I haven't figured out something that works.
What are you most concerned about in the world today?
This might be trite. I mean, we've got, a lot of tracks of work obviously going on around generative AI. And I'm not going to open up a whole can of worms, but, you just read such concerning headlines in the news about, things that can happen, things that we're now going to be able to do that, you sort of wonder, where does that leave us? And even just a handful of years.
Does that worry you? Or do you, I take the view that bluntly, we always overestimate adoption in a year and underestimate it in 10 years. And I think this everyone's going to have no jobs, and all of the gross over dramatizations, 94% of European corporates don't know what Notion is. Like, AI, good luck.
No, I agree with you. Like, I think adoption in the enterprise, all of that will be slow. No, I think what actually concerns me is just adoption for malicious intent, can imitate somebody's voice for fraud or, stuff like that. It's that's actually really concerning. I don't know what the solution is to that. And for people that want to commit that, I bet the adoption's is pretty quick.
What do you think are the biggest ways VCs and founders are misaligned?
It's the time horizon, maybe, and how much the outcome matters, right? I mean, ultimately, for an investor, this is one of whatever number of portfolio companies they have. And, of course, the dynamics are such that, only one, maybe multiple, if they're lucky, will return the fund or whatever. And they don't need every single one to work, so to speak, right? And as a founder, I mean, this is your life. So just fundamentally, there's got to be some level of misalignment. Again, it's not an incorrect intention. It's just different.
Totally. It absolutely is. Also, there's fees associated with fund management, which generally make it a little bit more comfortable for venture investors. So 100%. If you could choose someone to add to your board who's not on your board today, it can be anyone. Who would it be and why them?
Frank Slootman. I'm a huge Frank Slootman fan and read Amp It Up recently. Frank Slootman.
Tell me, what's the biggest piece of BS advice that you hear most often?
Oh, I think it's got to be around all the stuff around, hey, you've got product market fit, and now you're off to the races. It just ain't that. It just ain't that.
What's the biggest sin of the zero interest rate environment? You were born in COVID, so to speak. What was the biggest sin of that time period?
Oh, I mean, I think hiring to solve problems. I mean, again, this is obviously a topic that has been touched on many times, but I think even culturally, so many companies, oh, you have this problem, great, hire. And it's whoa, wait a minute. Do we really need to go hire a whole human just to solve the problem, or is there some other better way? And I think it just was easy enough to do that. There was enough capital. It was just, it was the easy, lazy answer. And so I think a lot of companies were affected by that.
What do you know now that you wish you'd known when you started Zip?
How hard it is to actually build a world-class product in this space, and how complicated it can be. I mean, when Lou and I were at Airbnb, we at different points in time, we both worked on search. If you go to Airbnb.com, what the search experience is like, and I thought that was complicated. Search platform and ranking and some of these things, and boy, was I wrong. I mean, this can be gloriously complicated. I mean, some of our customers in the enterprise, for example, got over 1,000 types of questions that can get asked with all sorts of different logic based on the thing that it is that you're buying. And, 20 plus different types of risk reviews alone. I mean, it can just be so complicated.
Why do you wish you'd known that? Because when you think about I wish I'd known this because then I would have done this differently. So if I give mine an example, I wish I'd known the importance of video in this age of media because I would have started YouTube very much earlier. If that was your answer, how difficult it is to build a world-class product for this segment, what would you have done differently then as a result of having known that?
I think we would have probably made some investments in our architecture that would have allowed us to like build out, we have a platform today, but to build out more of a platform without having to, expend a lot more resources that we've had to do as of the last 6-8 months. But to be fair, maybe the answer is actually no, we wouldn't have done that because it would have just taken more time and we wouldn't have put in the engineering resources because it wasn't the right thing to do at the time. I could see the alternative too, so I don't know.
My favorite thing is kind of like nothing's ever as good or as bad as it seems, and just life goes on. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. You have limited information. You do the best that you can with it.
Okay, so we're 2044. What is Zip then, and where are you in 2044?
Well, I sure as hell I'm still here thinking about procurement at Zip. In terms of where I think we can be as a product, if you think about it, right? Think about the notion of an approval. Significantly over 90%, even over 95% of the time, people are approving. Like if there's an approval, they're approving. You bet they're approving it. Like the rejection rate just across the board is naturally extremely low. And so when you think about that, you're like, well, that's kind of a deficient process. Like you basically have this thing where, people approve stuff and then so that they can see it and then they basically approve it anyways. So can you actually, instead of managing that process, can you just not need to do approvals because the software can do it for you? We're not there today, but there's definitely a world, and hopefully a lot sooner than 2044, where you can say, no, actually, it just gets done, right? Like you don't need to have a human go in there, review the thing, and then approve it. That's actually in 20 years, I think people will be like, really? You had humans reading these documents, thinking about them and then approving them? That seems dumb.
Listen, the reason why I do the schedules, I have no reason for. I used to stick to them, as you can tell, but nowadays they serve 0 point. Thank you so much for joining me, Rujul. This has been such a fascinating and varying discussion, but you've been fantastic.
No, thank you so much for having me.